Today's video does contain some strange, creepy, and disturbing paranormal type stories, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, go to astheravendreams.com and click the big button to do so. And of course, thank you. This happened when I went to a family reunion some time ago. Back then, I didn't know about black-eyed kids or that they even existed, but I've had plenty of paranormal experiences. So when I was talking to some people in the comments section elsewhere about this one, they thought that it was a black-eyed kid, so I thought I should share it. I was about 14 at the time. My little sister, Allie, was 7. There were other kids there, all our cousins and my brother Sean, but this was mainly about Allie and I. The reunion was taking place at a local park and was set up at a shelter. And there were lots of people around, lots of food and drinks, and, thankfully, lots for us kids to do to stay entertained. There were 2 playgrounds at this park. One was very old. Like, I wouldn't let my kids play on it without a dozen tetanus shots old. And since it was all made of metal, anything you had to grab or sit on was always on fire in the summer. And the other playground was much newer and a lot more fun to play on. It was mostly plastic, or at least was metal covered with plastic so the kids didn't fry on it. It was bigger and also had a bigger swing set, and other nearby things to play on. Of course, the shelter was closer to the old one, so we were a little further away from the adults. Probably wasn't the best idea not having any adults over there, but there were a few older cousins and other parents with their kids nearby. We spent a lot of time on the playground that day. We even managed to sneak a jug of tea from the party and cups away in a wagon, and have our own little party under the parts of the playground. The underpart was built like a playhouse, and had a window and doors that opened, and even a little mailbox. I loved it. We'd probably been out there for 5 or 6 hours at this point, and the sun was beginning to set, as the sky was taking on the pretty pink and orange colors, but it definitely wasn't dark yet. Some people had left, but of course, our parents were still there, so we continued to play. At one point, we decided to play a mix of hide-and-seek and tag, where you hide, and then if you're found, you can try to run from the it person until you were finally caught. One of our cousins was it at this point, and we all went and hid. He'd found a few of us, but then ended up saying that he had to leave so we could all come out. I told him I'm still not convinced he actually had to leave and he was just tired of seeking, as he was known to do that, but I digress. So we all started coming out, and that's when I noticed I didn't see Allie. I asked Sean if he saw her, and he said no, so I started looking around for her when I saw her standing near the fence line, which separated the park from the lake and a property on the other side. I don't think there was a house over there, but the lake was over there as well as just a bunch of land. Trees, bushes, just that. So when I started to approach my sister and saw that she was talking to another little girl that was on the other side of the fence, I was curious as to why she was there and not with an adult. The girl, however, did not look normal. First, she had on a really outdated dress. I now recognize this as Victorian-era style. It was long and puffy, like it had a petticoat underneath it. There were layers and ruffles all over with puffy sleeves. She also had on a small bonnet-type hat, and tight black curly hair framing her face. At first glance, it was odd, but it was a pretty cute outfit. However, all of this was shadowed when I saw her face. I thought the cap on her bonnet was covering it, but in actuality, she had no eyes. It terrified me. I don't know what she was saying, but I cut Allie off as I grabbed her arm, pulling her back away from the fence. Now, unless the girl climbed over the fence, I knew that we would be safe, as that fence went all the way up to the parking lot. We would have made it to our parents before she reached the lot, though. But as I pulled her back, I remember saying something like, "Who are you talking to? And what's wrong with her eyes? Is she okay?" Allie said that she noticed her wave when she went to hide and was also curious as to why she was over there, so she approached her. She claims that she didn't even notice her eyes until I pointed them out, but even afterwards, she didn't seem fazed by it, which was weird. It was freaking me out. Why was it not scaring a 7-year-old? The little girl only said that she needed help and asked us to go to the water with her. We both tried questioning more as to what she needed help with, but she refused to answer, always repeating pretty much the same thing. And it was creepier because it was always in the same tone, but with never any inflections. So I again asked her what was wrong with her eyes, and after a pause, she said, "I can see everything. Please, I'll show you by the water." Nope. I said that we would get an adult to help her, grabbed Allie again, and pulled her away from the fence. Now, my birthday had just recently passed, and my parents got me a camera with replaceable films, so I took it everywhere. I even had a little case that I carried it in that went over my shoulder, and I had been taking a lot of pictures that day. I did not hesitate to snap a photo of this girl as we walked towards the playground. Allie and I walked straight up to my mom and told her what we saw, and she seemed disinterested in our story at first. Then I mentioned something being wrong with her eyes, and that apparently caught her attention. We then walked her back to the fence, however the girl was gone. Allie and I insisted that it was real, but my mom just shrugged it off as either someone playing a prank, or maybe the girl found her guardians and they helped her. We never forgot about it, though. Allie didn't seem as disturbed by it, but man, I had a hard time sleeping that night. I kept my lamp on all night that night, and even tried reading something to get my mind off of it before finally falling asleep. It was probably about 2 months later when my mom finally took me to get my film developed for my camera. As I was going through the pictures, I remember specifically taking the picture of the girl, and I wanted to show my mom the proof that I was right. I was at that age that I was doing that on a quite frequent and probably pretty annoying basis, I'm sure. However, much to my dismay and relief, the picture was of a grassy field. The fence and glistening lake was among those photos, but there was no girl standing at the fence. There was no way that she would have been able to move out of the view for that photo and then go right back to where she was in the amount of time it took me to hold the camera up and snap the picture. I was in disbelief and still am to this day. I have no explanation for it. I even showed the picture to Allie, who remembered the events, and she was just as surprised at the picture as I was. So, as mentioned, telling some people online about it, they feel that there were several indicators of a black-eyed kid. If it was, that was the only time I've ever witnessed one, and it scared the hell out of me. Of all the paranormal encounters I've had, that was probably one of the worst. What would have happened if we would have went with her to the lake? It honestly freaks me out just thinking about it. Hey there. So, this happened last year while I was working at a local thrift store. We had always been one of the more popular and busy shops, so there was never a dull moment. But that also meant we were typically the go-to for donation drop-offs. I was a shift manager, so I was often there late, making sure all the donations were in, sorted, and put away, so that we didn't have to come back to a mess. At the time of this event, it was November, and we were doing a coat drive. One of the hospitals nearby did an adopt-a-family type deal each year, but they always started it early for this reason. They supplied the families with the coats that we got, as well as food and gifts for the holiday. Our facility was big enough to store all the coats for them, as well as wash and sort them, and they always brought us treats for our work, so really, it was a win-win-win. I liked all the feel-goods, you know? But this did not bring good feelings. This night, I already had 2 people working on the coats, and for some reason, we got slammed with donations. It was like a whole neighborhood moved out and just left us with everything they didn't want to take. It was probably about an hour after closing, and I felt bad keeping a couple of them after their shift. Everyone was so kind and thoughtful of others when it came to covering breaks or shifts, but I never expect anyone to stay longer than they're scheduled. This is why I usually stay late, so when we finally got everything in, I told them that they could head out. One of my guys, Ollie, agreed to watch the store so I could at least take a quick break before he left too, which I was thankful for. I went out to my truck so that I could smoke really quick and call my boyfriend. Afterwards, I usually just sit there with my window down, enjoying the night air, while doing something on my phone before I have to go back. This time, though, I just cracked the window and never fully rolled it down. I guess I was just being lazy or just too tired to bother with it. They were manual windows after all. I think I was reading some article or story because I was pretty involved in my phone, to the point that I wasn't really paying attention to my surroundings. So, when I noticed the time and went to get out of my car, I felt my soul leave my body, as I saw a kid standing by my driver's door staring at me. After letting out a hefty yelp, I caught my breath and realized that this kid had not budged. You know how when you scare someone by accident, so you also jump from being startled? Yeah, they didn't do that. They just continued staring in my truck. So, I say kid because they definitely looked younger, not to mention the old-timey school uniform that they were wearing. They had long, straight dark hair, and bangs long enough to cover their eyes. I always parked in the same spot, which was right below one of the few lights in the parking lot. Because of this, the light hit the top of their head, causing even more of a shadow on their face. After a few seconds that honestly felt like minutes, they hadn't moved from my door, making it so that I couldn't get out. So I just asked, can I help you? They didn't say anything, so I put my face closer to the glass to make out their face. And that's when they finally spoke. Can you give me a ride home? In a low, almost monotone voice. I continued to sit there for a moment before they finally repeated, saying, Ma'am, can you give me a ride home? Now hearing their voice, I was certain that it was a kid. They couldn't have been more than 14 years old or so. I had a son that was 12 at the time, and he was about the same height. But even though they were just a kid, something felt wrong. Terribly wrong. I noticed that I started shivering, but it wasn't even really cold. I felt incredibly uneasy, so I slowly lifted my hand and placed it on the lock. I spoke as I locked the door, trying to disguise what I was doing, and I told the kid, I'm sorry, hun, I'm still on working, just on break. Are you okay? Are you out here alone? The kid just said again with no emotion, Yes, please, ma'am. I'm scared and I just want to go home. Can you let me in? For someone who said that they were scared, they didn't look, act, or sound scared at all. They didn't look around. There was no breaking in their voice, and their breathing didn't even seem erratic. So, I told them again that I was still on the clock, and that I had to get back, but I offered to call an Uber or their parents, or even the police if they felt that they were in danger. They declined my offer, insisting that I should be the one to take them home. I was starting to become overwhelmed with fear. I couldn't get out of my truck because they were standing close enough to breathe on the window. I also did not want to get out with them so close to me. I didn't know what they were planning. So, in case something were to happen, I wanted to make sure that I knew what they looked like. I took my cell phone and shined the flashlight on their face, and that made it even worse. I realized it wasn't their bangs or the shadow in the darkness covering their eyes. Their eyes were pitch black. I could see their mouth and nose and followed it up to their eyes, and they just looked sunken in and dark, like they had no eyes at all. This caused me to say something a little unladylike, and I quickly rolled my window up the rest of the way and called Ollie. There was no way in hell I was getting out of my truck now. As I explained to Ollie what was going on, this kid just continued staring into my truck. He agreed to walk out to my truck to make sure that I could get out safely. At least I was hoping that if they tried anything, it would be a 2v1, so the odds should be in our favor. As Ollie approached my truck, I could hear him shouting something in our direction. This caused the kid to look over at him, and Ollie stopped dead in his tracks. I cracked my window again and told the kid that it was best that they move along, and that we would call for help. They slowly turned their head back towards me, then opposite of Ollie, and slowly started walking towards the edge of the parking lot towards the road. I was still a bit torn, but maybe that was because I was a mom. I was terrified. That fear that caused me to barricade myself in my truck was not letting up, but yet, I didn't want this kid to walk into the street. I quickly called 911, and when they were far enough away, I got out. I talked to Ollie for no more than a minute or so as I explained what all had happened. By the time I turned back around to look for the kid, they were gone. The parking lot was bare. There was a small median at the edge that just had barberry bushes in it. If you aren't familiar with them, they're pretty much just small purplish leaves and thorns everywhere. There's no way they tried to hide in it because of those thorns. There was nothing else in the lot, and I was in complete confusion as to where they could have gone. My shivering seemed to get worse, but again, I wasn't cold. I sure was terrified, though. We both went back into the store, locking the doors and waiting for the police. Thankfully, Ollie agreed to stay with me until they arrived, which made me feel better, and also made my experience more credible, I suppose. When they got there, we told them what we had witnessed. I left out the eye thing because I didn't want them to think I was crazy or pulling some prank. I basically explained that there was a kid around here with no adults, and that they were asking for help but took off. They looked around the building, in that same lot, and even across the street. As you may have guessed, they never found them. But they said that they would make a report and check for missing and runaway children reports. I never heard anything else about it after that incident. Ollie and I have never forgotten about it, and, in fact, we've talked about it on occasion. He told me about when he stopped walking towards me. When they turned to look at him, all that he could see was a dark face with faint, glowing eyes. He said it was like the glare that some people's eyes have in photos, but there was no reason for that to happen by just looking at them. Between that and the overwhelming dread he instantly got too, he felt his body made him stop, or something told him to not get closer. I kind of knew of black-eyed kids' stories prior, but I never really thought about it one way or another. I started looking into it more after I told a friend about this, and they were up in arms, thinking that I had just experienced one. I can definitely believe it now between the weird clothes, dark yet glowing eyes, not to mention the eerie feeling they brought with them. If it was a black-eyed kid, then I hope to never experience anything like that again, because I don't know how I would react, and I don't want to know what would happen if there wasn't a barrier between us. This story is about these two black-eyed kids that I was unfortunate enough to meet. I was indifferent to them because, of course, I had never experienced this personally. But I do wholeheartedly believe in the paranormal, and after my experience, I'm sure that they are out there. I got off late one night, but I was really itching to go for a run. Due to a double shift, I hadn't been able to for the last 2 days. I preferred running at night because I got to be alone with my thoughts and enjoy the cooler breeze in peace, so I didn't want to miss this opportunity. I changed really quick, put my hair up, and locked the door behind me. I had created my own path, taking advantage of an incline which, looking at my path on my fitness app, it almost does a figure 8. So I went around the corner before the last turn to be back on the same street of my house. Looking up ahead, I could make out 2 people standing at the corner, almost like they were waiting to cross. However, they weren't facing towards either of the crosswalks. They were just facing towards me. This immediately caused alarm bells to go off, so I had slowed down to a walk. As I got closer, I could make out their features better, and from the looks of it, it was 2 kids. One was definitely older than the other, like maybe about 14 and 8. Their clothing was odd, though. They were both in one of those long, old-fashioned nightgowns. Think Little House on the Prairie style. I thought that it was odd to see these 2 younger girls wearing something like that, but then my mind went to some of the worst-case scenarios. What if these girls had been kidnapped and escaped? Maybe they were just lost and confused. So, I called out to them and asked if they were okay. No response. I still felt uneasy about the situation, even more so since they weren't responding to me. So then I thought, maybe they were a distraction so that someone could abduct me. I got a little closer and again asked if they needed help with anything, and when they didn't respond again, I told myself that I did my good deed in trying to check on them. They just didn't seem interested in my help, so I decided to nope my way away from the situation and cross the street before reaching that corner. This, of course, meant that I had to cross again twice to get back to the correct side. And once I got back on the same side, I noticed that they had turned to face me yet again. I picked my pace back up to a sprint and ran back to my home. Once I got in, I locked the door and went to splash water on my face to calm me down. Afterwards, I took off my shoes, and as I was walking towards the kitchen to get some water, there was a knock on my door. My stomach just dropped, and I instantly regretted living alone at that point in time. I slowly approached the door and looked out the peephole, and I saw those same 2 girls standing on my doorstep holding hands. It was like they were staring right at me through the little hole. However, I could clearly tell now by the porch light that their eyes were pitch black. There was no white part. There was no iris, just pure black. I started getting this overwhelming sense of dread just looking at them, so I slowly and silently backed away from the door, thinking they couldn't have possibly known this was my place. There was a tall hedge on the other side of my neighbor's place that would have blocked their view if they were still on the corner, and when I was unlocking my door, I looked around at that point and I couldn't see them either. I hadn't turned on any extra lights yet in the living room, and there was only the light on above the sink in the kitchen, so they couldn't have seen any light through my curtains either. I couldn't make sense as to how they knew this was my home. However, as I backed away from the door without saying anything, I could hear the girls say, "Ma'am, can we please use your phone? We need to call our mom." I didn't know how to react. How would they have even known that I was at the door? I just stood there without making a sound, contemplating what to do, when they spoke again. "We know you're home, ma'am. Please, can we come in to use your phone? So I approached the peephole again, and while looking at them, I asked them, what are you two doing outside alone this late at night in the first place? I watched as they both turned and looked at each other simultaneously, and then turned back towards the door. It felt like they were communicating telepathically or something. They just said, we got lost. Please, ma'am, can you let us in? I finally just told them that I would call the police for them, and that they would be able to take them back to their mom. They again looked at each other and back at the door, but didn't say anything. So I backed away and grabbed my cell phone and pretended like I was calling the cops. I guess I grabbed my phone in case I actually had to call them. I started saying out loud like I was talking to an operator, yes, hi, my address is... my address. And there are 2 young kids at my door saying they're lost. Can you send an officer to take them home? After this, I went back to see what they were doing, but they were gone. They weren't on the porch in my yard, and I couldn't even see them out in the street in front. I was already feeling freaked out about their presence alone, but it felt even worse not knowing where they went. So I called the cops for real. They sent someone out and checked the surrounding area, but they were nowhere to be found. I feel like the officer thought that I was a bit crazy, being afraid of some 14 and 8-year-old, but there was definitely something wrong with those kids. What were they going to do if they did get inside? Either way, I had never experienced black-eyed children before, and I genuinely hope that I never do again. So this was a collection of 3 black-eyed children, black-eyed kids, however you want to look at that, stories. Black-eyed kids are an interesting topic to look into. It's hard to know if they exist. Obviously, these 3 stories have experiences with something that is similar to what the stories out there tell you, or what the information out there explains as to what these are. But if they do exist, which, again, we have 3 experiences here, what are they? It seems they're definitely something paranormal, but I feel like there's some sort of evil spirit, some sort of maybe demonic spirit of some sort, right? Because they always seem to want to get at somebody, like they need help, quote unquote. I need to do more research into them, because these stories are terrifying, and it's not something that I've done a ton of research into. I've done very surface level reading, so good stuff. Yeah. Hopefully you all enjoyed these stories, and hopefully all of you enjoyed this 2020 Halloween extravaganza that has just been this crazy ride. This crazy ride of all this was supposed to happen last month, and then COVID hit me, and then it was, minorly delayed because my voice sounded like crap. It still kind of does. I have weird sinus issues today, but hopefully this has been a treat for you. Hopefully, this daily content has been something that you guys have just genuinely enjoyed, appreciated. You all have done amazing things for the channel over these 2 weeks, and I am so happy to have done this. It was exhausting, I admit, but I loved it. And you know what? I think we might do it again next year. What do you guys think? Well, if you want to tell me what you think, you can go down to the comments and leave me a comment telling me your thoughts on that. If you liked the video, you can also hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. I would appreciate that. And yeah, hopefully, since you all said you would never get tired of me, you'll be back tomorrow for our regularly scheduled program. Tomorrow is technically a continuation of daily content, but is not part of the daily content extravaganza. So we're going to go back to our Monday, Wednesday, Saturday schedule after this. It's been fun, guys, but we got to go back. Again, hopefully you all enjoyed it, and hopefully you all had a beautiful weekend, and hopefully you all will be back for the next one. But until then, friends, you're loved, you're valid, you're important, you're the best you that you can be. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. And friends, until I see you again, sleep well.